This practice is very famous in Myanmar, but it is absolutely unknown to our Buddhist scriptures. Our Buddhist scriptures explain meditation of breathing, but they never suggest that we would be breathing coarsely. There's no suggestion like breathe coarsely or breathe hard. No, there is no such suggestion. Not even indirect suggestion. There's no idea like you should breathe too fast or very fast, or you should breathe very strong. No, it just doesn't exist. But in Myanmar it is very famous because there were two men who are believed to become enlightened through this very practice. And if somebody becomes enlightened through a certain practice, then others think maybe I also can become enlightened through that practice. So that's where people follow it. It started with Thanlyin Sayadaw, the great master Thanlyin. The great master Thanlyin learned that he has to concentrate on breath from a master who was a student of Ledi Sayadaw, one of the best, one of the greatest masters of our scriptures, one of the greatest masters who have memorized all of the Abhidhamma, all of the 7 books, actually it's 12 books in the Burmese edition. And Thanlyin Sayadaw, at that time still just an ordinary man, a farmer, learned from an astrologist that he will die within a few days. So he got so scared that he just wanted to do the best he can with the rest of his life. And he learned that the best he can do is to meditate. So he learned that the best way to meditate is to keep mindful of the present moment. And when he is sitting, it's the best thing to keep mindful of his breath. But as he was observing his breath, he couldn't see it. So this is how he resolved it. He started to breathe coarsely. And as he was breathing coarsely, he was easier concentrated. And then after some time, he got certain lower psychic powers, such as he could predict who will die and when, while he himself did not die. He died after many, many years after this. He was able to predict, to say where another person's cattle ran away. So people who lost their ox came to Thanlyin Sayadaw to ask him where is their ox. And then he just told them, okay, yeah, it's there. And it was there. And when he said that somebody will die tomorrow, they really died tomorrow. Of course, without his help. So, through this practice, many yogis get a very powerful concentration and this kind of lower psychic powers. Thanlyin Sayadaw did not get stuck at these psychic powers. He entirely relinquished the ability to have these psychic powers. He relinquished this ability, this skill, so he stopped to tell people when they will die or where is their ox, and continued to meditate further. As he continued to meditate further, he was able to see the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not-self of this body and mind. Thus, he became a stream enter and later once returner A few weeks later, non-returner, and yet another few weeks later, an arahant, fully enlightened being. So then people liked it. They thought, hey, look at that. He didn't know how to read or write. He didn't know how to read or write. He didn't go to school. At this time, he was around 40, 50 years old, I'm not sure. But by that age, he was married and he had a house and paddy field and a pair of oxen. And at that time, he learned from an astrologist that he will die within a week or two. So that's when he started to meditate, when he had a wife and his possessions. And he was very mindful of every moment, everything he did, from the moment he would wake up until the moment he would go to sleep. He was continuously mindful. And when he sat down for meditation, he would be very careful to be there with the breath. Because again, he was afraid of death. He was afraid not that he would die, rather he was afraid what would be his next life. So he tried really hard. And then when he became a fully enlightened being, people came to him and they learned his method. And of course, following his method, it has become famous. One thief was thinking about himself. Look at that. This Sonlon Sayadaw, he cannot write, he cannot read, but he became fully enlightened. I can write, I can read. How come I would not become fully enlightened? Said the thief. So the thief stopped stealing and sat down to meditate, following Sonlon Sayadaw's meditation practice. And within a few months or years, I don't know his story in detail, he became a fully enlightened being. He is known as the Te Engu Sayadaw. But he was more famous than Sonlon Sayadaw, and therefore he had much more students, and he has also many centers, many meditation centers all around Myanmar, where great people, wise men and wise women, come to meditate and develop their mind. So even though logically this doesn't make any sense, even though it is not in our scriptures, it has helped at least 2 people. So maybe it will help you too. But I myself, as a teacher from the Western origin, can never afford to support this kind of practice, because it is very dangerous. And therefore, as my own personal opinion, if some, and of course as my responsibility when someone comes to my center and becomes my student, I strictly prohibit this practice. I would never allow even 5 seconds, 4 seconds maybe, never even 5 seconds of this kind of unnatural breathing. And that is because something else helped me. I am not fully enlightened, but I believe I'm quite well on the way. And what helped me is observing the breath as it is natural. The natural breath for me is what helps me. So when I observe natural breath, I can see the breath very clearly. I also started to observe my breath when I was young. I'm still a young kid, but I started even younger. And in my age of 15, when I started to meditate on breath, I didn't have any difficulty to locate breath. So there would never be a reason to breathe coarsely. I did breathe coarsely unintentionally in the beginning, that is true. But then my teacher, a Czech teacher, I'm Czech of course, so I learned meditation in Czech Republic. My Czech teacher observed that I breathe coarsely when I meditate. Unintentionally, I didn't know that. I absolutely didn't know that. So he notified me, you breathe coarsely, don't do that. Observe your natural breath. And that's where I started to observe my natural breath. And that's where I started to become more and more concentrated. But breath doesn't work for me because I am not the temperament for breath. There are 6 temperaments, and each of the temperament has a meditation practice which works best. Of course, there will be combinations of temperaments, so it's good if you can think of these temperaments more as a nice suggestion. It is much more complicated. People are not just 6. There are much more people. So the main 6 temperaments are greedy, faithful, angry, wise, dreamy, and deluded. These are the 6 temperaments. And when we decide which meditation technique or even which kind of residence or food or people to associate with are appropriate for which character, we divide them into 3 pairs. So it's also easier to remember. So you have the first pair of greedy, faithful, second pair of angry, wise, and the third pair of deluded and dreamy. The first pair of greedy and faithful are best off if they observe the repulsiveness of this body. Greedy and faithful, both of them are relating positively, in the very neutral meaning, positively to an object. And this is in comparison to the angry and wise. So the angry and wise are relating themselves negatively to an object. So angry relates himself or herself negatively to an object because he doesn't want it. Wise one relates negatively because he needs to examine it. So not positively, he relates negatively. That means there is no particular attachment to it. Deluded and dreamy are not relating themselves to anything through laziness or ignorance. So what are the objects? For greedy and faithful is observing the repulsiveness of the body. For angry and faithful is loving kindness. And for deluded and dreamy is breath. So there are people in this world who are not able to appreciate meditation on breath. But they would appreciate another practice. So for me, I appreciate loving kindness much more than breath because I am the angry character. So for me, loving kindness practice is immensely effective. It's interesting, it's powerful, and it's incredibly effective. So I do not dedicate myself to breath anymore I dedicated myself to breath for around 3 or 4 years, and then I changed to loving kindness. So then for around 5-6 years, I dedicated myself to loving kindness only. But I'm still the angry character, right? Loving kindness or any meditation practice will not remove or change your character, but it will help you to get your mind open to the reality as it is. So we are balancing our attitudes. So the greedy and faithful are balancing their positive attitude with the negative based practice of observing repulsiveness in their body. The angry and wise are balancing their attitude by the loving kindness, where they are positively relating themselves to all living beings. And the deluded and dreamy are balancing their attitude from objectless attitude to an attitude with a clear natural object, which they always had and always will until they live. Right? So this way there's the balancing of the attitudes for each character. And therefore, if you think that breath doesn't work for you well, if you do not enjoy breath, there are another 60 meditation techniques from which you can easily choose, and they are strictly within Theravada Buddhist. They are strictly within Theravada Buddhist teaching. So, breath are 2. Although it sounds like 1, it's 2 techniques. You can use breath for concentration. That's where, as you observe breath, you do not accept any other object than breath. Whatever other object would arise, whether thought or feeling or sound, you would just discard it and forcefully come back to your object, the object of breath. This is the concentration practice of breath. Then there is the insight practice of breath. Totally different. You still observe your breath, but you accept everything that's coming in and out. If there is a thought, you accept. Thought arises. It goes, you accept. Thought goes. If there is feeling, you accept. There is feeling coming. When it goes, you accept. Feeling goes. The same thing with sounds or any other secondary object. So the breath there is the primary object. It's that what you are there for, but you do not reject the nature of the mind. You are there with the mind as it is. So the mind arises and passes away. This object arises, passes away. Another one object arises and another object arises and passes away. You are there with the object. You are there in the present moment, totally accepting anything at all that comes and goes. And this is the insight practice. So breath is actually 2 practices. Depends on how you work with the other objects during breath. Also, when you are able to keep the breath as the primary object, you can still continue to work with breath as the primary object. Namely, you observe breath as the condition for life. So you observe how breath is the condition for this body to function. If you do not breathe, you die. So as you breathe, you consider, indeed, this breath is conditioned for life. If there is no breath, there is death. With this attitude, you can relinquish this body. You can remove all attachment toward the body because you see that it's not yours. You don't have any power over the body. The body makes breath. You don't create breath. It's the lungs which draw air inside. You can see how the lungs breathe. It's just the lungs who do that. And anytime if there is a problem in the lungs, whether you like it or not, you may stop breathing and you may die. So many people choke to death because their lungs weren't able to draw enough air into the vacuoles. So we consider breath as the condition for this body, and thus we detach from this body. Then we continue considering the breath as feelings. There are feelings during breath. So we consider there are pleasant, unpleasant and neutral feelings during breath. Then we consider that as there is breath, there is mind in work. There is mind at work. There might be greed for breath. There might be hatred toward breath. There might be ignorance based on breath. There might be the desire that I don't want to know or do anything, just enjoy the breath. So we can observe the mental states during breath. Finally, we can observe the phenomena that arise and pass with breath. You can observe your mindfulness, your ability to distinguish different phenomena, your joy, your energy, your joy, your peace, your concentration, and your equanimity. Thus you observe your 7 factors of enlightenment. And when your 7 factors of enlightenment are complete, then you become enlightened. So, yes, there is this technique of a very unnatural breathing in Myanmar, and it has helped many people. But for me, as my personal opinion, I would suggest that nobody ever meditates that practice, and nobody who would like to call himself or herself my student is ever allowed to do this. On the other hand, you can observe your breath as a natural phenomenon which is innate to you because you have it since the time of your birth. And you can observe it and learn from it your body, your feelings, your mental states and phenomena. And moreover, if you find your breath not sufficiently interesting and never think about your character, most probably you will be wrong. You can try another techniques, of which there is a plenty in the Buddha's teachings.